I make animations, short animations, and I work by myself in a studio at the University of Pennsylvania. The animations have conversations between puppets. Usually they're about 3 to 5 minutes long. I make up the conversations, and usually I do research things about history, characters from history. I like to challenge myself each time I make one. I've been working on this for about 16 years, and every time I make something, I try to combine different media. This is a cow that I made out of clay, and the background is photographs that I took in Hawaii that are altering 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and so the background is a sort of a combination of photographs. The clay model is 3D scanned, and then it's animated in a 3D animation program. So I'm looking for ways to combine materials and make new looks and show things and create characters in a way that haven't been seen before. That character is Pascal, and he's having an interaction with this beetle. He wrote a book where he called Thoughts, and there was a passage in the book that inspired this animation about how when you focus on something very small and you look at how much detail is within it, you forget about all of the detail in the world, and then when you think about the world, you can't think about the very small thing that you're thinking about. So in order to make that beetle, I made a resin model. I filed it and shaped it, and then I cast a bronze sculpture. So some of the animations also have sculpture that accompany the installation. This is an installation in an art gallery where I had 5 characters, the 5 characters of the animation installed as bronze sculptures. Then the animations themselves are installed in art galleries or museums, and they're installed on a screen about this big, and they're projected in a loop. So I have to think about my short animations of 5 to 8 minutes looping and what that means to have a story play over and over again. There's also a sense of scale because I'm working on a small scale with my puppets, and then they're enlarged and they're played on a big screen. This is a monument to George Washington Carver, 150 feet, but it's a sculpture this big, and my puppet is about this big. And I combined them together and then created a story around a person who takes care of this monument. This is a conversation, a fictional conversation that I combined with an industrialist named George Brown and an economist named Friedrich Hayek, and they're having a conversation about reflecting back on their life. And I used recordings of them from about 40 years ago to create a conversation that didn't exist before. But what I wanted to talk about today was film language. Film language is something that, it's probably something that you know. It's the most universal language that everyone in the room knows, but I could be giving this TED Talk anywhere in the world and everybody would know that language. It's something that you know when you watch a film, that if you cut to from a wide shot of a screen of a field to a character, to a medium shot of the character, to the close-up of the face, things will start to evolve in the film in a certain way, and a story will start to be revealed. You know that's the main character. That's how the film's going to be. This character is going to take you on a journey through a story. That's film language. If you're videotaping a birthday party, you follow the cake into the room with a close-up shot. You zoom out to capture everybody who's present, and then you zoom in and you cut in to capture the cake candles being blown out. That's putting that together. You're telling a story. It's the way that you want to recount that experience, and that's film language. I thought that when you capture that with a handheld camera, you're creating that language and you're creating that story in real time. It's not like setting the camera down on a tripod and fixing the way that you want to recount that from a single point of view. You're really reacting like a dancer. You're making the film as it passes. That's a performance. It's a gesture. The camera person is a person, it's a character in the film. We know that. So I had a concept for a new animation a couple of years ago. My animations usually take 2 to 3 years to produce. The idea was inspired by this performance in 1966 by an artist named Robert Rauschenberg. The performance was at the Armory in New York, and it was a series of experimental performances dealing with art and technology. The premise of the performance is that a painter named Frank Stella was going to play tennis with this tennis pro, Mimi Kanarik, and every time they hit the ball, there was a microphone on the tennis racket, and that sound of the hitting of the ball would be amplified into space. And one of the lights illuminating the court would turn off, and the court would eventually go into darkness. So you would have this really amplified experience. And they were rallying. It wasn't a competitive match. Then, after the match, it was completely dark, and they used an infrared camera, and it shot the audience and projected it on a large screen, and everybody looked like they were kind of ghostly. I don't really understand that part of it, but I was inspired by the tennis match. So I started reading about the history of tennis. I'm a tennis player myself, and I'm really interested in tennis. And I found that there was a sport that came before tennis called court tennis, jeu de paume. And 400 years ago, this court was built in a town called Fontainebleau. And I decided to make a model of that court and create a puppet animation inside of it of 2 people playing a tennis match. I thought, so many people like to watch sports. Why should I have a story with my animation if everybody's comfortable watching a sport? There's a rhythm to it. It's something that it puts you in a certain condition when you're watching sports. You sit back in your chair a little bit. There's a rhythm to it, and it's really something that lets you meditate in a way, lets you pull back. So I decided these are slate tiles for the floor, and I cut each of them. I decided to work for a year on building a model of this tennis court from photographs. And this is a 15-foot long model. I was just concerned about what the inside looked like, not the outside. And so this is my studio. A lot of the parts are made with laser cutting and computer, but also a lot of parts are made by hand. This is my son helping as we were putting down the roof shingles. Part of the sport is that when you serve, it must bounce off of this slanted roof and fall into the court on the other side. So since I teach animation in the art department at Penn, we also have this great fabrication lab, and so I use that sort of interchangeably with the hand skills. This is a computer drawing of the lopsided tennis rackets that they use being cut out of a piece of plywood. And that's the finished racket that's strung. This is thread. It looks like string here, but it's really just a tiny thread. And this is the armature that's inside of the puppets. That's off-the-shelf commercial armature. Next time I plan to make my own because they need to be very small. And what you see here is a silicone mold where the silicone's poured in on top of this armature, and that allows me to bend the puppet and manipulate it in very small movements. The clothes are made from patterns of clothes from 100 years ago on a very small scale as well, and sewed. Some of it's by hand, some of it's by machine. And this is the finished model of the court. I can duck down and crawl around inside. It's about that big. The balls are just about the size of a pea. The other inspiration was this film that I saw from 1980, shot by Charles Atlas, of Merce Cunningham's dance. And what I liked about it was that sense of moving the camera in response to the choreography of the dance. It's a real-time adjustment, and it's almost as if the camera person's dancing and creating a character in itself, in himself, in response to the dance in real time. I can see the thinking happening in the camera movement here, reframing the dance as they achieve these different poses. So I thought, what if the tennis match, instead of being shot like a sport on television, from certain key vantage points to understand the action most clearly, was shot like dance, where it was about reframing the pose constantly over and over again and updating those images. The problem with that is that to make a live camera, well, I know what's going to happen in the stop motion animation. This character is going to hit the ball. But I don't know what that's going to look like from the point of view of the camera, and I can't hold and move the camera because I'm animating the puppet. And also the camera, the size of the movements would have to be about 1/1000th of an inch sometimes to get that slowing down or that slight micro gesture of a twitch or a readjustment of the heel of the camera person. The size of my movements with the stop motion animation are like this. Those are single frames. I could shoot about 24 of those frames in one day in order to get this quality of motion that I was looking for. That's about 1 second of animation a day. I shot and what I mean by a day is about 6 hours, because that's about how long I could stay in that box. So I shot for 180 days. I created around 3 minutes of animation. These are the size of the movements. So what I needed to do is come up with a way to take a handheld camera and shrink it down to the size of my puppets. I came up with, this was an experimental process. It took about 6 months. My first guess of what I could do was to take a camera on a Steadicam. This is a device that they used in that film with the ballet dancers, and move around in space in a motion capture lab at Penn and track the position of the camera moving around in space. I came up with a better way to do that, and I'll tell you about that in a little bit. But this motion right here looks like I'm just holding a camera in the model. It looks like I'm just moving it like this. What it actually is I stole Charles Atlas's camera movement from his film, 30 years old, and put it into a robot and reproduced that motion inside of my set. So can you imagine taking the camera movement from some kind of event from many years ago and then reproducing that camera movement in a contemporary time, same camera movement, different time, but extracting it. So I'm using the camera, the architecture angles here on the right to extract the camera movement. I had some of the axes reversed, so when it's kind of going like this on my robot. But essentially I thought, okay, that concept works. So I ended up using video instead of using this motion lab. Then I could use it in my own studio. I took a video camera, I moved it around like this, I extracted the motion, and then I put that into a robot. When I extracted the motion, all I got was this grid of numbers. And so I have the frames. This is frame 1, frame 2, frame 3, and the position and rotation of the camera. Then I loaded that into a 3D model of the court, a computer model. And there you see one of my shots of motion. And so I could visualize what it would look like. Then I loaded that into another software, and this is something I invented, a plugin that would let me connect these two programs together. And this software allowed me to control motors that would turn and move the camera. All of that goes through a Arduino, which is something that sometimes if you take a computer robotics class, you might start to learn about Arduinos. They connect to the computer with USB, and they allow you to send signals to motors and lights and turn them on and off. I bought 4 or 5 different things from eBay, linear tracks that use motors to move things. And so this is a combination of linear tracks and off-the-shelf parts with different kinds of brackets that I put together to be able to move the camera up and down, right and left, and rotate it. And this is it, using it in my set to try to make it transparent. I sometimes sent it through the windows. I had it bridging across, and I would get in there and move the puppet. Then the robot would move to its next position. Then I would get in and move the puppet, and the robot would move to its next position. This is it moving. It's just doing a slight rotation there. That's a huge rotation compared to most of the rotations that I did. This is a really fast pan. And there I am. You can kind of see people ask, "Where are your legs?" There's a hole, a secret hole in the set, and I could crawl up from underneath because it was all closed up. And sometimes there were shots where I had to sneak in and make the movement. So what you see here is the whole process. On the top left, that's my video footage. Then here is the simulation in the computer. And the bottom 3 images are the movement of the robot repeated 3 times, one without me, one with me doing the puppet animation. You can see me there in the background with my shirt color changing because it took like 4 days to make that shot. And then the last one on the bottom right is the character in the distance, and I collapse all those shots together to make one sequence of animation. So now I'd like to show the animation. It's 2 minutes and 52 seconds. This premiered at the Whitney Biennial this last February. And I'll say thank you now and let the animation play.